If you're looking for a glorified toy commercial, Masters of the Universe might be for you. Following the 1983 cartoon and the subsequent 1987 movie starring Dolph Lundgren as He-Man, we finally have, about 40 years later, a new He-Man movie titled Masters of the Universe. Let's talk about it. So just to preface this video, I am not a He-Man fan. I don't know much about the Masters of the Universe. So my opinions are basically going to be a layman's opinion. I'm coming into this movie cold. I don't have any expectations. And I may feel a certain way that the fans may not agree with. So fair warning. So the trailers actually look pretty decent. It looked like it was going to be kind of a tongue-in-cheek, fun little adventure movie. But I wasn't really expecting too much. So as a non-fan casual moviegoer, I didn't have a whole lot of expectations. I was just hoping to be entertained. I wasn't expecting an epic masterpiece or anything like that. But all in all, I gotta say this is probably one of the dumber movies I've seen in a long time. And it was dumb in the sense that the characters were written kind of dumb, the dialogue was kind of dumb and meaningless, and the plot didn't make a whole lot of sense either. It was also very bare bones and basic. So just literally like low IQ inputs to creating this movie, I would say. It was meant more for kids. It felt like a long cartoon or a long toy commercial. I mean, you even have the Mattel logo at the beginning, which kind of set the tone because it really did feel like a long toy commercial. Now, don't get me wrong, this wasn't completely unenjoyable. There's definitely aspects that I can appreciate, and it was entertaining enough to sit through it. But I honestly didn't get much value out of watching this. Like, if you told me the studio put a kid in charge of the direction and writing and said, hey, 12-year-old, here you go, write this movie, I would believe it because it felt like it was written for little kids to consume. So if you're like a 12-year-old boy, you might really like this movie. So the movie that comes to mind that comes pretty close to the same tone and style and genre of this Masters of the Universe movie is Dungeons and Dragons. Except Dungeons and Dragons did a pretty good job. It was entertaining, it was funny when it wanted to be, and the action was great. And overall, it was a fun little adventure. And this movie kind of tries to mimic that energy, but just doesn't quite get there. The jokes just fell flat and it was just too much. And then when it did hit, it was nothing more than a chuckle for me. So I felt like it was almost like a James Gunn situation where there's constant attempts at making the audience laugh. And some of the jokes were just very sloppy and very lazy. And it was probably more offensive than what you're used to in a James Gunn movie as far as overdoing it. The basic plot just seemed very meaningless and lacked weight. It didn't seem to have much of a point. Things just kind of happen and people are fighting and battling each other, but it didn't really seem to be a point to all of it, which again, I guess if you're a kid and you just want to see muscle-bound dudes in armor beating each other up, then this is going to satisfy that itch. Now, I will say this movie is full of action, and the action is good. It's even better than average, I would say. Some of the shots were different and unique in terms of how the camera worked around the battles. There's some very up-close shots, some 360 angles, some slow-mo, and some pretty powerful effects in terms of the sound effects and how people reacted to certain punches and hits and that sort of thing. And it did feel like the characters involved had superpowered strength, and that was pretty fun to watch. Dialogue was just bad, man. It was very hard to watch when every line just felt so lackluster and so lazily written. And it was pretty frustrating because I felt like they were just wasting the audience time and they put very little effort, very little thought behind the lines that were delivered. And they could have spruced it up just a little bit, just be a little bit more thoughtful, be a little bit more precise and artful with some of these dialogues. But unfortunately, I felt like every dialogue scene and every line was just insultingly bad. It's okay to go for that kind of campy, cheesy, cartoony vibe where you have a lot of jokes infused and every character is funny. But they gotta hit, they gotta be funny, because the worst thing you can have, in my opinion, is a movie that tries to be funny or a joke that tries to be funny and it's just not, because then it's just a waste of everybody's time. It's awkward, it's uncomfortable, it is frustrating. I just wish that they went back on the editing floor and reviewed all the jokes to see which ones were actually funny and which ones were not funny at all, and cut out the ones that just weren't funny. Just reduce them. We don't need them. It slows the movie down, it's distracting, and it just doesn't serve its purpose. All the visuals are pretty nice. The special effects, the backdrops, the cinematography, the costume designs were also very good. I thought the characters looked great. But unfortunately, it was mostly eye candy and just not that much substance. I thought Nicholas Galitzine as He-Man slash Prince Adam was actually really good. I don't recognize him from any other projects he's done. I thought it was a good fit for the character because he had to play kind of this awkward loser type character and then also transform into this He-Man type character. Jared Leto as Skeletor was an interesting choice because they manipulated his voice. I couldn't tell it was Jared Leto, and I was trying to hear his voice and personality, but he hammed it up pretty good. I thought he was pretty fun to watch. He was a very mustache twirly villain, which I guess is appropriate for this franchise. And it was kind of refreshing to have a main villain be as snarky and sassy as he was. Wasn't expecting that. The character doesn't look like he would be like that, but maybe he was in the original source material. I don't know. But Jared Leto did manage to breathe some life into this character and made him kind of fun to watch. Idris Elba as Duncan, or Man at Arms. I don't know. I love Idris, but I felt like this is probably one of his worst characters and worst performances. He was kind of playing this comedic, drunken type character, but it just didn't land with me. Again, we can contribute that to the poor writing and the bad jokes. But overall, I didn't find him very likable. I didn't see the magic that he usually brings to characters. And I think that's because he's less authoritative and more of a nuisance in this movie. Kind of a letdown to use an actor like Idris, but not get the gravitas that we usually get from Idris. I'm not going to go into detail in this video about plot points and spoilers, but there are a couple things that I want to talk about and mention. So this is the part that you want to pause and come back later if you haven't seen the movie. So now that you've been warned, I'm going to get into a couple of specifics here. I did appreciate the Dolph Lundgren cameo at the gym. I thought that was really fun. I did watch the old He-Man movie as a kid. I don't remember it too well. I guess I must not have liked it too much, but still, I knew that Dolph Lundgren was He-Man back in the day. So it was cool to bring him back to make an appearance in this movie. So when he finally finds his sword, he finds it appropriately in a kind of a vintage toy store, like a collectible store with a bunch of geeks who would be into He-Man, which I can kind of relate to, right? I've been to these stores and I frequent these stores. So that was kind of a nice nod and gesture to the fans who are watching this movie. He basically is a prince. He runs away. The only reason he has power, so he thinks, is because he can find the physical sword and say some magical words about having the power. Okay, so to get more specific about the stupidity of this movie, and this might come from the original source material, so forgive me if I don't know this, but still, it doesn't change my opinion. The fact that he is the prince and runs away when, they're getting attacked by Skeletor, and just hangs out for a while until he finally finds a sword and realizes that all he has to do is say the magic words. And then lightning comes down and transforms him into a super strength, super powered hero. And that's all there is to it. Like, he didn't earn it. There's nothing special about him.
Now you're ready.
And saying the magic words, like, that just seems very lazy and uninspired to me. But let me know if that's all the cartoon was, or if there's more to it than that. And I felt like it would have done the movie service if he had to earn it in some way or another. Like, maybe he was meant to have the power, but he had to learn a lesson, or he had to go through some trials and tribulations to get to the point where he's earned the power. It just felt very random, very unearned. So the whole plot: Skeletor shows up, everyone's living in peace, he attacks, and he basically just wants to destroy Eternia. And he manages to do so, but he captures the king. And then the kid, Adam, gets away, the prince, and they don't go looking for him until like way later when he's an adult to go find a sword, because apparently the sword is the source of power. And for unknown reasons, Skeletor just wants more power, even though he's already ruling. I don't know. It just didn't make a whole lot of sense. And then, okay, so he has a sword, he summons the power, and then he just goes and fights Skeletor and a bunch of his henchmen throughout the whole movie until he finally kills Skeletor at the end, or seemingly kills him. And that's really it. Like, that it didn't feel like there was any point to any of that, right? I did enjoy all the different characters and the different names, which he gives the names in his head like as a kid. So they're kind of goofy names like Fisto and Trapjaw and Ram Man. and they think it's like offensive. It works because these are silly names and these are the names that they originally had, but it kind of explains why they have all these silly names because in 10-year-old Adam's head, that's what he named him. And although I'm not familiar with the content, I am familiar with the images of He Man. And I know that they did a good job on the costume as well as his civilian clothes with the pink shirt and the reddish vest and all that. So that was pretty neat detailing to make him look like a movie version of what we've seen in the cartoon. Yeah, so overall, I wasn't bored. It was entertaining enough to keep me watching, but there's definitely times when I just felt very frustrated with the lack of effort put into this movie, and it just didn't feel like it was worth my money to go into a theater and watch it. So overall, I'm gonna say it's a 40% for me as far as rating this movie. Yes, it's low. Yes, I'm not a fan. So if I'm wrong, if you're a fan and you think I got it wrong, I'm curious to know what you fans think if you watched the original cartoon or the old movie even and you were excited about this movie, if you enjoyed this movie, let me know in the comments what you did enjoy about it, what they did get right in your opinion, and maybe some of the fan service that went over my head. But yeah, overall, guys, this movie was just too dumb, too silly, too childlike for me. But that's just my honest opinion. I wasn't a He Man fan coming in, and I wasn't a He Man fan coming out.